All right, get ready for a trip back in time, because today we're taking a deep dive into Birmingham, England,
Yeah?
and the real story of the Peaky Blinders. Now, you've sent us some really interesting sources,
Right.
and let me tell you,
Okay.
the truth is a lot more intense
Yeah.
than anything you see on TV.
A lot grittier, a lot less glamorous.
Yeah, much more violent, that's for sure.
Hmm.
But to understand the Peaky Blinders,
Right.
we need to go back even further,
Oh.
before they even existed.
Even before.
Ever heard of the Sloggers?
The Sloggers, yeah.
They're the brutal precursors to the Peaky Blinders.
The forefathers, really.
And their story sets the stage for Birmingham's descent into chaos.
It really does paint that picture.
So take us back.
Okay.
What was life like in Birmingham in the late 1800s?
Well, imagine Birmingham in the late 1800s.
Okay.
Industrial revolution's going on.
Right.
But, the benefits aren't reaching everyone. There's widespread poverty, unemployment, and this deep sense of frustration among the working class.
A lot of tension brewing.
A lot of tension.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's where the Sloggers emerge.
And who were these Sloggers?
So they were young, mostly teenagers,
Okay.
and they were driven by this potent mix of, boredom, resentment,
Right.
thirst for excitement.
Oh, I see.
Think roving gangs of youths,
Okay.
brawls, robberies, assaults.
Wow, even assault?
Even assaults on the police.
Attacking the police. That's pretty audacious.
It really speaks to that level of lawlessness
Right.
that existed in Birmingham at the time.
Wow.
Police seen as this oppressive force,
Oh, yeah.
and the Sloggers weren't afraid to challenge them.
So we're talking serious violence already
Oh, yeah.
from these teenagers.
Uh-huh.
Are there any accounts from that time?
Oh, we have some really vivid police reports from 1872.
Okay.
So one report describes 400 youths
Wow. Brian?
rioting in the Cheapside district,
Okay.
smashing windows, attacking shopkeepers. Just a few days later, another mob of like 70 to 80 youths,
Wow.
armed with sticks and stones, attacked a police officer.
Yeah.
And some of those arrested
Bullshit.
were as young as 13.
13. Gosh, that's unbelievable.
It's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what fueled this level of anger?
Well, I think when we consider the context,
Got
it makes sense.
Right.
These kids were living in poverty,
Okay.
working long hours,
Yeah.
facing a bleak future,
Right.
very few opportunities for recreation.
Right. So the streets become their escape.
The streets become their battleground,
Yeah.
their only way to express their frustration.
This hopelessness, lack of opportunity,
Exact.
coupled with this resentment of authority.
Yeah. Recipe for rebellion.
Yeah, for sure.
And what's more is that the police were outnumbered
Oh, wow.
and often outmaneuvered by these young gangs.
So they couldn't even maintain control.
They were really struggling.
So you've got this social unrest, economic hardship. Police can't keep up. It's a perfect storm.
A perfect storm for the rise of gangs like the Sloggers.
Right. And this brings us to the Peaky Blinders.
Right.
In the 1890s.
Yeah.
They kind of evolved.
Yeah, they evolved from that same breeding ground
Right.
of poverty and discontent,
Okay.
but perhaps even more organized
More organized.
and ambitious than the Sloggers.
Okay, so before we get into the Peaky Blinders themselves,
Okay.
I have to ask
Yep.
about the razor blades in the caps.
Oh, the razor blades.
Well, is that a real thing?
That's a myth,
Really?
perpetuated by the show.
Okay.
No historical evidence to support it.
Wow, so where'd the name come from then?
Most likely from their style of wearing their caps.
Oh, okay.
Low over their eyes,
I see.
creating a blinding effect.
Okay, so no stylish razor-wielding gangsters?
No, far from it.
What did they actually look like then?
So, early Peaky Blinders
Okay.
favored like loose trousers,
Hmm.
belts with large buckles,
Okay.
boots, jackets, bright scarves. Later, they adopted the flat caps
Okay.
and a hairstyle called a donkey fringe,
Donkey fringe. Oh, wow.
described at the time as giving them a devilish look.
Wow. Okay, so more rough and tumble than chic.
Yeah, for sure.
What about weapons?
They were brutal, really.
Oh.
Belts, sticks, bricks, knuckle dusters, knives,
Oh, gosh.
sometimes even pat guts with stones attached.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot more visceral than what we see on the show.
Absolutely.
So they weren't romanticized anti-heroes.
They were poor,
Yeah.
often uneducated, opportunistic criminals
Right.
who resorted to violence as a way of life.
Okay, so they were a product of their time.
Absolutely.
But how do they actually operate within society?
That's a good question.
Were they ostracized?
Not quite.
Or did they blend in?
Most actually lived and worked within the working class.
Oh, really?
They had jobs as factory workers, traders, laborers. They weren't living solely on the fringes.
So they led these double lives, working by day, terrorizing by night.
Precisely.
That's even more disturbing.
Right.
Because they weren't just driven by desperation. Yeah. It's almost like they chose violence.
It was almost like a choice for them.
For fun.
Like a way to exert their power.
For power, yeah.
They were known to be cowardly, though.
Oh, really?
They often attacked in groups.
Okay.
Prey on the vulnerable.
And did they face any consequences?
That's the shocking part.
Okay.
The sentences were often really light.
Oh, wow.
A few weeks, maybe months in prison.
So they were getting away with it?
Essentially, yeah.
That's appalling.
It is.
It's no wonder people lived in fear.
Nah.
But surely someone had to try to stop them.
Well, there was one man.
Okay.
Charles Houghton Rafter.
Okay.
Birmingham's chief of police.
Mm-hmm.
He was brought in to clean up the city in 1899.
And his arrival kind of marked a turning point.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've set the stage.
We have.
Explored the origins of the Peaky Blinders. And now we've got their arch rival entering the scene.
Yeah, this is where things get interesting.
It's about to get good.
Definitely.
So we've got Charles Rafter, Birmingham's top cop, stepping into a city overrun with gang violence. What was his approach to tackling the Peaky Blinders?
Rafter was a different breed of lawman, unlike his predecessors who just relied on brute force. He understood that to break the gangs, he needed a more calculated approach.
So less about cracking skulls, more about strategy.
Exactly. He focused on building a competent, well-trained police force that could really match the Peaky Blinders.
Okay, but dealing with a problem like the Peaky Blinders, it couldn't have just been a police matter, right?
You're absolutely right. Rafter knew that he needed the support of the community.
Okay.
To really succeed, he worked tirelessly to gain the trust of the people, many of whom were terrified of the gangs.
I can imagine that must have been a challenge.
Oh, absolutely.
To get people to speak out against the Peaky Blinders.
It took immense courage for people to come forward.
Yeah.
To testify.
Yeah. Knowing the risk.
But Rafter's leadership and his genuine concern for the community really inspired people to do what was right.
It's amazing how one person's dedication can have that effect.
It truly is. And Rafter's efforts combined with the bravery of those who testified, they really started to chip away at the Peaky Blinders' power. But there are other factors at play as well.
Oh, like what?
Well, around the same time, we see the emergence of youth clubs and organized recreational activities. Mm-hmm. These gave young people alternative ways to spend their time and energy.
Okay, so instead of hanging out on the streets and getting into trouble.
Exactly. They had places to play sports, learn new skills, connect with positive role models.
So it's not just about law enforcement, it's about social change as well.
Exactly. And along with these social shifts, educational reforms also played a huge role.
Okay.
Schools started offering better care for children. The government started providing access to medical treatment, food, and housing for those in need.
So it was a multifaceted approach.
Exactly. It addressed the root causes of the problem, not just the symptoms.
All right, so it was effective policing, social reforms, community involvement.
Precisely a true testament to the idea that lasting change requires a holistic effort.
What about the Peaky Blinders themselves? Did this have an impact on them?
By 1914, with the world on the brink of World War I, the original Peaky Blinders, as we know them, they were largely gone.
Oh, wow. Right.
Many of them joined the army. It marked the end of an era.
That's quite a journey from the Sloggers to the Peaky Blinders and their eventual decline. A lot happened in those few decades.
It's a reminder that history is rarely a simple narrative.
Yeah.
It's a complex tapestry of events and social forces.
Yeah, well said. But the story doesn't end there.
Of course not.
Even with the decline of the original Peaky Blinders, gang activity didn't just disappear from Birmingham.
Right.
In fact, in the post-war period, a new and even more ambitious criminal enterprise took shape. The Birmingham Boys, led by the notorious Billy Kimber.
Billy Kimber.
Wait a minute, wasn't he that imposing gangster who confronted Tommy Shelby?
Yes.
In the Garrison Pub in the TV show?
That's right.
So the show drew inspiration from real-life figures like Kimber.
They did.
But as always, I'm sure the truth is far more interesting than fiction.
Always.
So tell me more about Billy Kimber and the Birmingham Boys. How did they differ from the Peaky Blinders?
Well, Billy Kimber was a different kind of gangster.
Okay.
He was a large, charismatic figure, commanded respect and fear. Unlike the Peaky Blinders, who were mostly confined to Birmingham, Kimber had national ambitions.
Right.
He wanted to create a nationwide criminal organization with himself at the helm.
So we're talking a major step up in terms of organization and ambition.
Absolutely. And Kimber's primary focus was the racetracks.
Okay.
He saw huge potential for profit in controlling protection rackets and illegal gambling operations at courses across the country. And this move brought him into direct conflict with some established figures in the underworld, including a prominent Jewish bookmaker named Alfie Solomon.
Hold on. Another name from the show.
Right.
Alfie Solomon.
Yes.
Was he anything like his on-screen counterpart?
Well, there are definitely parallels, but the real Alfie was a well-established figure in London's racing scene.
Okay.
And when Kimber's men tried to muscle in on his territory, Solomon refused to back down.
That took guts standing up to Billy Kimber and his gang. What happened?
Well, Kimber's men responded brutally, leaving Solomon with a bloody face and missing teeth.
Oh, gosh.
This sparked a full-blown gang war known as the Racecourse War of 1921
Okay.
between Kimber's Birmingham boys and Solomon's allies.
So it was North versus South, a battle for control of these rackets.
Exactly.
So who came out on top?
Well, it wasn't a clear victory for any one side. The Racecourse War was really a series of violent confrontations, betrayals, shifting alliances.
Yep.
Sabini, with his ruthless tactics and his control over key territories, he played a decisive role, often tipping the scales in favor of Solomon and his allies. But Kimber was tenacious. He didn't give up easily.
So it was a stalemate then, a bloody standoff with no clear winner.
In a sense, yes, the violence eventually subsided and a fragile truce emerged.
A truce between gangsters that doesn't sound very reliable.
It wasn't a formal agreement, more of an unspoken understanding that Kimber would control the north and Sabini the south.
Okay.
Solomon, though, battered and bruised, managed to keep his position in London.
So things kind of settled down.
For a time, yes, but the underworld is a treacherous place.
Right.
Just as things seemed to calm down, a new threat emerged, one that would reshape the entire criminal landscape in England: the law.
Oh, so even the most powerful gangsters are no match for the forces of order.
Precisely by the late 1920s, the police started cracking down hard on illegal gambling operations at racetracks across the country.
Okay.
This crackdown, coupled with changing social attitudes and the rise of legitimate entertainment, it really spelled the beginning of the end for Kimber and Sabini.
So it wasn't a dramatic showdown or a hail of bullets that brought down these gangsters, but a gradual erosion of their power.
Exactly.
Brought about by law enforcement and changes in society.
Exactly. History is rarely as tidy or as dramatic as we might imagine.
Right, and this brings us back to our initial discussion about the difference between historical reality and the romanticized version we see in pop culture.
Yes, it's easy to get swept up in the excitement of the Peaky Blinders, but it's important to remember these men were criminals who built their empires on violence and exploitation.
Billy Kimber, for instance, was known to abandon his children.
Yes, he was unfaithful to his wife and left his children to live in poverty. He ruled through intimidation and ruthlessness, always looking out for himself.
Not quite the dashing rogue we see on TV.
Not at all. And Darby Sabini, despite his reputation for being a powerful leader, he was also brutal.
Okay.
He used coercion to maintain his power. He was feared but not respected.
And what about Alfie Solomon? Was he any different?
Sadly, no. Despite defying Kimber, Solomon was just as ruthless. He even killed a man during an argument.
Oh.
It's a stark reminder of just how dangerous the world of gangsters was.
And you mentioned earlier a connection to the Shelby family from the show.
Yes.
Could you tell us more about that?
Please do.
Well, it turns out that the creator of Peaky Blinders, Steve Knight, was inspired by his own family history.
Interesting.
His father had uncles who were part of a family called the Sheldons.
The Sheldons.
Very similar to Shelby.
Wow, so there were real Sheldons roaming around Birmingham.
There were. And according to accounts, the Sheldons were a notorious family.
Okay.
3 brothers, John, Samuel, and Joseph,
Okay.
all involved in various criminal activities, violence, gambling. They were even part of a major gang war in Birmingham.
It sounds like they were living a life straight out of the show.
It does, and they even had connections to the Garrison pub, just like the Shelbys.
Right.
They lived near the actual Garrison pub, but their criminal operations were primarily in the city, unlike Billy Kimber's gang.
Okay, so we have all these different gangs operating in Birmingham and beyond, each with their own ambitions and rivalries.
It's a complex web of alliances and betrayals set against this backdrop of a rapidly changing society.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
It is, and we've only scratched the surface.
Okay.
Where do we go from here?
Well, let's delve deeper into the Racecourse War. explore that fragile truce, and ultimately unravel the truth behind these notorious figures.
Okay.
We'll separate fact from fiction and reveal what happened to Billy Kimber, Darby Sabini, Alfie Solomon, and the real-life Sheldons.
Okay, so we've got this epic clash of gangsters brewing. The Racecourse War of 1921,
Yeah.
Kimber versus Solomon, with Darby Sabini holding the balance of power in the South.
Right.
Sounds like something straight out of a movie.
It was a turning point, really, in organized crime in England.
Yeah.
The outcome shaped the underworld for years to come.
So who came out on top?
Well, it wasn't a clear victory for anyone.
Okay.
The Racecourse War was marked by so much violence,
Right.
betrayal, shifting alliances.
Mhm.
Sabini, though, with his control over those key territories,
Yeah.
he often tipped the scales in favor of Solomon.
Okay.
But Kimber, he was a tough one. He didn't back down easily.
So it was a stalemate then.
Kinda, yeah.
A bloody standoff?
The violence did eventually subside, and a fragile truce emerged.
A truce between gangsters. How long did that last?
It wasn't a formal agreement, more of an unspoken understanding.
Okay.
Kimber in the north, Sabini in the south.
Right.
Solomon, beaten up, but you kept his spot in London.
So things settled down.
For a time, but the underworld is unpredictable.
Yeah, of course.
And just as things calmed down, a new threat appeared.
Okay.
A threat that would change everything for these guys.
What's that?
The law.
So even the most powerful gangsters
Give them...
are no match for the law in the end.
Exactly. By the late 1920s, the police cracked down
Mm.
on all those illegal gambling operations
Yeah.
at racetracks all over that, plus changing attitudes,
Yeah.
the rise of legitimate entertainment.
Mm.
That was it for Kimber and Sabini.
So no dramatic showdown, just a gradual decline.
Exactly.
Law enforcement and societal shifts.
It's rarely as dramatic as we think.
Right. And that brings us back to our discussion
Full circle.
about reality versus romanticized versions we see in pop culture.
Yeah, Peaky Blinders, it's exciting.
Right.
But we got to remember these men were criminals.
Built their empires on violence.
Fear, exploitation.
Billy Kimber,
Yeah.
he abandoned his children.
Unfaithful to his wife, left his kids in poverty.
He was looking out for number one,
Absolutely. Intimidation, ruthlessness. That was his style.
not the guy we see on TV.
Not at all.
What about Sabini?
He had a reputation as this powerful leader,
Right.
but he was brutal too.
Okay.
Used force to stay in power, feared, not respected.
And Solomon. Any different?
No, sadly.
Mhm.
Despite standing up to Kimber, Solomon was ruthless.
Yeah.
He even killed a guy in an argument.
Oh, wow.
That world was dangerous.
It was.
You mentioned those Sheldons.
Right. The real life inspiration for the Shelbys.
Yeah. Were they any better?
Not really.
Mm.
They had this reputation for being cowardly,
Oh, really?
avoiding fair fights,
Yeah.
using violence to get what they wanted.
So just like the other gangsters.
Just like them.
Same story, different name.
The real figures behind these gangs, far from the romanticized characters.
A product of their time,
Right.
but their actions left a mark.
A dark mark.
It's important to remember history is about people,
Yeah.
real people.
Their lives impacted by these events.
It's not just stories.
So how should we view shows like Peaky Blinders knowing all this?
That's a tough one. Each viewer has to decide for themselves.
Right.
Appreciate the artistry, the entertainment,
Yeah.
but acknowledge the darker side too.
They weren't Robin Hood figures.
Smart.
They profited from misery.
We also got to remember the real heroes.
Oh, yeah. The ones who resisted.
The ones who fought for a better society.
People like Rafter
Dedicated his career to the law.
and those who testified against the gangs.
He risked everything.
Their stories deserve to be told.
They do. They represent the best of us.
Standing up to injustice.
They help bring down those gangs.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway?
Approach history with a critical eye.
Okay.
Look for the complexities.
Right.
It's easy to romanticize the past,
Yeah.
but real people were affected.
It's not just a story.
It's not.
So to our listener,
Yeah.
keep exploring.
Keep digging.
Ask questions.
Challenge the narratives.
There's always more to uncover.
always more to learn.
Until next time,
Until next time.
keep diving deep.
Yeah.